Walking through the city lights all aglow. Everybody's got a story to show. Wheels keep spinning, streets overflow. Hustle never stops, we're in the flow. Skylines high like our dreams in the air. Concrete jungle, we got flair. Rhythm of the night, we don't care. Underneath the stars we breathe rare. In this urban jungle we're alive. Heartbeats echo as we strive. Dreams collide where the streets survive. Together we'll thrive, side by side.
And welcome to tonight's Order Paper podcast. I'd like to sit there and welcome Laura back to the passenger seat for the show tonight. Yes. Also joined by Blake Forbes and Peter Fraser. How is everyone this evening?
Fine, thank you, Sam.
Now, before we go, our viewers want to know, who are you, Peter?
Okay, I'm Peter Fraser, Mokai Pātea Nui Tonu, Ngāti Hauiti ki rangi TK. Having gotten that out, my career bears a Moses, and that I used to work for. Spent a lot of time doing that in places like the Treasury and Math Policy. Interestingly, I was 7 years on the health desk there in the early 2000s. Kind of saw the light and escaped. So the Pharaoh and I had a bit of a parting. I've done work in the private sector since. I've set up a boutique economic consultancy. I've done a lot of work around irrigation, dairy production, agriculture, competition policy. In between, I've actually been the National Secretary of the New Zealand Māori Council and also the former chair of Whakawe Research Services, which is New Zealand's only iwi-owned, iwi-mandated public health research organisation. Ngā mihi.
Thank you for that. And just let you know, you're on the side.
Yeah, your camera's rotated.
Oh. What on earth's happened there then?
How about that? Mode.
Yep, that works better, and then just tilt the face up and we're back in business.
Don't worry, it does that to me occasionally. We don't know why.
Everyone at home's going to be like...
yeah, that's everyone will end up with a really sore neck, and that's a really bad thing to happen. They'll then go to the health system and find that it's not there for them. Sit in an A&E department for about 18 hours.
And you're going to need to tilt it up, otherwise we're seeing great lips but no eyes.
I like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're not having much fun with that.
Well, this is...
Well, that sounds like a bit... Yes, now that looks brilliant.
Okay, well, I'm trying to see it. It's sitting on a book at the moment, so at least we have some sort of semblance of erudition going on in the household.
And here's a great one from Paul. I think delivering the list of qualifications sideways adds to the impact. So that's one of the things.
Also speaking quickly makes it sound more impressive and gets it over easier.
Yeah, now let's kick off with the first thing. Before we get to the nitty-gritty of the removal of Section 7A, let's eat a speaker's ruling. As might know what happened recently with David Seymour and the Jeep.
And humility for the welfare and peace of New Zealand. Amen. Members, yesterday the Leader of the Opposition raised with me the possibility of a connection between the actions of MPs outside the House and the prescriptive rules of standing orders which relate to parliamentary proceedings. I received a letter from Tangi Utikiri asking if Standing Order 418T might apply in this case. That case being the circumstances under which David Seymour advanced a Land Rover up several steps of Parliament despite being told by organisers that they did not have permission to do so, and ultimately withdrawing once the security officer told him that it was the Speaker's decision. May I thank the many email correspondents who've encouraged me to take a range of actions, none of which are permissible. I suggest they accept that standing orders don't currently anticipate responses to this situation. This was the case in 2003, and it hasn't changed since then. Criminal law applies now, as it did then. But I note that when a prosecution was brought against Shane Arden in 2003, the court said it was a waste of time and the proceedings were not carried on with. If standing orders are to be broadened to give the Speaker wider authority over MPs' activities that are not connected with the proceedings of Parliament, then it should be the Standing Orders Committee that fixes or first examines those possibilities and considers any implications from those changes that might enable some of what has been requested. If those changes are agreed by the committee, then it would be for the House to enact. I am in an interesting position of many expecting an action without a sound basis for that to be undertaken. I'm interested in the application of standing orders that relate to the parliamentary proceedings and MP privilege as it relates to those proceedings. In my opinion, it's not possible to prescribe broad enough orders that achieve both protection of privilege and prosecution of stupid. This may be something that the Standing Orders Committee is more able to clearly define. Accordingly, I'll seek to convene that committee in the sitting week of 3 to 7 March. The claim that Standing Order 418T might be applicable in this case does not pass scrutiny. It relates to orders made by resolution of the House, not administrative decisions of the Speaker. Members, I've received a letter from Ingrid seeking to debate under Standing Order 399 the decision by the Minister for Mental Health to reallocate funding to the Mental Health Innovation Fund. This is a particular case of recent occurrence for which there is ministerial responsibility. The big hurdle to overcome is whether the matter warrants setting aside the business of the House. Ministers sometimes make decisions that surprise officials and do not always act in accordance with official advice. It is a minister's right to do so, and they answer to the House for their decisions. I do not think the application makes out a case for this matter being sufficiently urgent to give it priority over the business on the order paper. The application is declined.
Okay, so how do you think the fact that there is no standing orders between what you call privilege and stupidity? Quite a good way of describing it.
Well, I'm appalled that they can't do anything without David driving up the steps. It just is weird that there's no provision in place, but yet they can attack another party for ripping up a bill and doing a cultural dance, but they can't sanction somebody for driving up steps. It just seems bonkers.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on. I'll pick up on that, and I'll just be really blunt. This is just a case of white privilege. If it was a Maori driving a Land Rover up there, they'd be arrested, but it's not.
Sure.
It's David Seymour, and it's that simple. We don't need to overthink these things. And I say, don't feed the beast. Don't give the beast oxygen. He wants to be made out. And this is the thing about David. He's a personification of privilege, yet he wants to make himself out as a victim. Oh, I'm being beaten up by these people. I'm just going up the steps. Once I heard I wasn't supposed to do it, I stopped straight away. I'm really apologetic, blah, 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 blah. Look, David, you know exactly what you're doing. Just don't feed the beast. We know he's a dickhead. Look, they called him stupid in the House. That's pretty strong language. I don't think they'll get much stronger than that, but you can sort of see where it's going. Don't feed the beast. It's white privilege, yet again, leave it at that.
Okay, let's kick off with the remaining part of the removal of Section 7A with Marita Meno Kapakingi on her 5-minute introduction speech.
Repeal of Section 7AA Amendment Bill.
Right, we're up to call number 6. To party married 5 minutes. Maria Meno Kapakingi.
Tēnā koe te pika, tēnā tātou katoa te whare. So I have a 5-minute window here, te pika, where the coalition government must listen to me even if they can't hear me. And it's to say this, to object profusely to this shockingly flawed, ignorant, trauma-informed, sanctimonious piece of legislation. It's a nonsense. Our job, Te Pāti Māori, is to stand and make the points that only we can make as our job. We relish the responsibility to bring the voice, the aspirations, and the solutions of our whānau mokopuna to this House. When Dame Whina Cooper said, "Not one more acre," back in 1975, we saw our people rise to the occasion. We need only reflect on the change her words incited to understand what it means for our people in today's climate when I say, not one more mokopuna. This was the phrase plastered onto posters of all New Zealanders, Māori, Pākehā, tangata tiriti, held when they ascended from Te Hikoatika, Te Rerenga Wairua, Tamariki, Tēnei Pito, onto Parliament grounds and a very peaceful hikoi, Mr. Speaker. This poster sits on the wall in my office, and next to it another poster, which reads, 1/3 of mokopuna in state care, whakapapa to Ngāpuhi. This reality means that mokopuna no te tai tokerau are left trying to fight alone in a system that denies the very essence of who they are and who they come from. This threat is aggravated knowing that without Section 7A, our tamariki will have their Māoritanga severed, despite the Minister saying this, that there will be cultural components, that there will be cultural elements, as if culture is something you carve up and you compartmentalise, and then you expect that that might be enough culture and custom for the day. This severed line will last generations. What the Minister ignores or is ignorant to the fact is that culture is a protective factor. I wish that she knew that and would repeat it and think about that. Mr. Speaker, this House already knows what severed lines and broken generations looks like because the AIC report told us so really clearly. That when you systematically divest and deprive mokopuna Māori of their culture, you make fodder and victims of our children, of families, of whānau. Dare I say, the apology made by the Minister of Education that day is already falling short of its promise to never do it again. For noting, Mr. Speaker, the original intent of Section 7AA was to hold Oranga Tamariki, a tragically failing care system, because 14 failed reports told them so, accountable. It demanded that they finally reduce disparities by setting measurable outcomes for Tamariki Māori, Madam Speaker. It was designed to assist and help. In the removal of Section 7AA, the government seeks to persist in the abuse and harm of mokopuna in state care, the theft of generations, an experience that many other Indigenous peoples across the globe have endured. Nevertheless, this theft has sparked a new wave of Māori activism. Removing our rights has only united our people. It is our job to serve and to do what is best by our tamariki and mokopuna Māori. Mokopuna Māori are our lifeline. They hold the key for our future as tangata whenua, and while state care continues to threaten their undeniable potential, we know that the return to us will be the right thing to do. Ngāpuhi Paipai at Waitangi turned their back on David Seymour, his party and everything he stands for. We too, Party Māori, turn our back on David Seymour, the Minister, and insist that they do the right thing and tear the bill up. Kia ora tātou.
Well, that's very strong words to say about tear the bill up, even though I do feel that's such a Te Pāti Māori cliche that seems to be what they're known for bad legislation, as we would call it.
Mm-hmm. You want to know a funny thing about this bill? It was first proposed by the John Key government under his party, under their national party. So I think it's very funny.
To introduce what later became Section 7AA.
Yep. So it was national. That got the ball rolling on that one. So I find it very funny how activists in this current national party is trying to undo all of that.
Yeah. It's like, what's the next party they're going to sit there and try and undo? Jim Bolger?
Yeah. I don't trust ACT with anything. ACT to me now represents another child traumatized. That's what ACT stands for now. As far as I'm concerned, it's like, don't put children around the ACT party if you know about Tim Jago and David Seymour's activities.
Mm.
What I would say about to Laura's point about the 7AA stuff being brought in by the John Key government, you've got to remember that at that time, the National Party were very liberalised. They had a lot more liberal candidates in their party. So this is a lot more extreme of a national party than the 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14 era. They've shifted more right when they used to be sort of centre for me, more liberal.
I'll go in further than that. I'll jump in here. One of the briefings I gave to the New Zealand Māori Council before the last election, because there was a view that we've dealt with national governments before, and at the end of the day, we can normally do business with them. And I said, this will not be a national government. I said, look back in history. I said, the National Party is actually the amalgamation of two parties being united in the Reform Party to form a united anti-Labour bloc back in the 1930s. That is what their whole purpose was, not to stand for anything, but to oppose the Labour Party. That was their only raison d'etre. They'd add on things about small business and enterprise and stuff like that later. But really, their reason for existing was to oppose something.
Yep.
So that I think is the starting point. Now within that, and it's not a simple urban-rural divide, because historically you've seen some amazing national rural MPs. And so this is what I said. I said, in the past, we've always had a Jack Marshall, a Ralph Hannon, a Duncan McIntyre, a Doug Graham, a Chris Finlayson around the table so we can do business. Who do we have now? Simeon Brown. That's what we've got.
Brown.
That's what we've got. And I mean, my cousin Tamapotaka is nothing but an embarrassment. I'll be really blunt about this, Tama. If you're listening in, you need to listen in and you put your ears on, because I don't think your taringa are working very well. I think they're simply painted on at the moment, because here's the deal. I've listened to your interviews where you support the Prime Minister, where you support the Minister of the Education. You are nothing but their lackey. You were sent to some of the best schools in the world not to be a lackey for a weak Prime Minister.
Imagine having a jellyfish for your Prime Minister.
It's just, you know, the thing is, what you've got is a weak Prime Minister, an economy that is tanking. A chunk of that, to be honest, is the Reserve Bank having to try and put inflation back into the bottle. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I will cut Nicola Willis a break, as she did inherit a structural deficit, which needed to be closed. So I'll give her a break there. But the way she's gone about it has been appalling. And again, I'll give a comparison. I was in Treasury when Bill English became the Minister of Finance in the global financial crisis. So sorry, I was in NAF policy. And I remember briefing Bill English on what we thought was going to be the bankruptcy of Fonterra. And that was potentially going to be like our General Motors going down the drain and having to bail it out. Now, the difference between Bill English, who the first year he came in the intake of 1990, so he remembered the 1991 mother of all budget. And he said that if he was ever finance minister and ever faced a crisis, he would never do a mother of all budgets. And if you look at what he did, despite all of the criticism, he very carefully kept health in check, he kept education in check, and it took him 8 years to bring the government back into balance and then handed over an extremely sound set of books. This government is borrowing more money than the last one. They do not have COVID as an excuse. And 15 billion of that is for tax cuts that were completely unfunded. The support package that went out during COVID, the initial wage support package, was only 12 billion. It cost us 12 billion to rebuild Christchurch after the earthquake. They have given away 15 billion for absolutely no reason. That is the level of stupid in this government. So if you want to use the term stupid, it is not just limited to David Seymour, it is actually across the government. And it will manifest with a national.
This National Party is what happens when you take John King and hit him over the head with a baseball bat. To put it bluntly.
Now, this is going to sound trumping my own horn here, but I today sold coffee at the Corey Carnival. I'll be honest, I didn't meet the targets that I thought I would have met. But I'm planning to go back next year because I actually like the organisation who runs it. And speaking to the stallholders around there, it's like they were down on last year and their main reason that they believed behind it was the economy, nothing to do with the event. And this was in Nicola Willis's backyard. Yeah. So that is something that's in there. I'm looking at doing it next year. I like the organisers; they're brilliant. Yeah, we need more organisers like the Corey Lions Club.
Yeah, Corey Lions Club are awesome, and to be honest, this is not exactly a decile one part of town.
No.
So if they're finding it hard, go out to the decile one parts of town. They're finding it really hard.
Yeah. Okay, let's kick off with Te Anau Tuiono, who gets the other half of Speech 6's 5 minutes.
Te anau tui ono.
Tēnā koe te pika. He tango tō tātenei reo, he tango tātenei tamariki mokopona, ngā rea taku kauhau o te pōna, he reo Māori. Te tapiri atu nei, aku nei whakaro, aku nei kōrero, ki tā topi tuahine o te nota e mea atu, ki te whakanui ana na whakaro o te whina kupa. Hei te mihi tōne ana mātou nā kākariki ki tērā o nā tauira o te mana motuhake o te tino oranga tiratanga. Me ke anō hoki me tapiri atu nei aku mihi. Kia te maunga e kore e neke, kia whakaro nui tōni tia kia koka iritana tā whiwhirangi. Tērā momo e chaki ana o tātou tamariki mokopona. Tērā momo i whakapau werawera, i whakapau kaha ki roto i nā tau, ki te whakarite nā āhuatanga, kia chaki o tātou tamariki mokopona. Tērā nā kau e naro no ana, ngaro katoa ana, ki roto i tēnei pere whitu e takahi ana ki runga i te treaty o Waitangi. I te pika, kia mātou nā kākariki e uana ki te whakaro, he tanga o tātou tamariki mokopona. He tanga mai te wā i whānau mai rātou, he tanga anō rātou, i te wā i tipu ana rātou. Nō reira, ko tēnei me te whakapapa, he tanga. Ko tēnei me te whanaungatanga, he tanga. Me pehe tātou i chaki ana te whakapapa me te whanaungatanga ki roto i nā momo whare pēnei ana te hanga, ki roto i nā āhuatanga o te ture, ki roto i nā āhuatanga o ngā waiture me nā paupapahere e puta ana i nā kāwaratanga. Ko te treaty o Waitangi, ko te treaty o Waitangi anō te take. E te pika, ia mātou nā kākariki e whakaronga ana ki nā kōrero i tau ana ki te kibiti whiri nā take ki o tēnei o nā pire. I kaharanga o nā mātou, i nā auwe o te iwi, nā auwe o nā hapori, nā auwe o te whānau. I kite anō mātou tērā o nā wairua ki Waitangi, ki roto i nā rā ko taha atu. I kite ana te mana nui o nā puhi i rātou anō i tāhuri o rātou nei tuara ki te krauna. Me te tūmanako anō, nā te tāhuri o nā tuara, ka kaha are nā taringa o te kāwanatanga ki nā auwe o tō tātenei ao Māori. E te pika, ia kahurangi kātā tō mātenei tangata e huri haere ana i te motu, i pēra ana te āhuatanga o te karere. E pēra ana te āhuatanga o te wairua. Tētai te mea atu, ko tēnei me te whakapapa, he me ahurea noa, he me nā te Māori noa, hoi anō he me, kei reira te hohonutanga o te Māori, kei reira te orokohanga o te Māori, tēnei me te whanangatanga me te whakapapa. Tēnā te take i kahana o tātenei hapori ki te weruati ki tēnei kāwanatanga, ki te mea atu, nā runga i te mautonu o te treaty o Waitangi, ki roto i nā pire pēne ana te āhuatanga, ki roto i tonu i tēnei pire, kai noho tonu ana te mana i tāpahia ki roto i te wahanga o te ture o te whetu ka tai tātou te tiro, te āhuatanga o te kuhuna o te treaty o Waitangi ki roto i te nākau o tēnei o nā ture. Nā te wete, nā te tangohia o te treaty o Waitangi, mai tēnei ture, ngai nā ture pēne ana te hanga, ka kite ana tātou te ao Māori, e kore ana tēnei kāwanatanga e paku whakarongo, e paku aroha ana kia tātou anō te Māori. He wero nui tēnei ki te kāwanatanga. He wero nui tēnei ki nā pātu o tēnei paremata. Nō reira, e te pika e mātou hoki e whakarongo ana ki nā pahu o te minita, kāre mātou paku whakapono, kāre mātou i te paku whakaitia, kāre nā mātanga i paku whakaitia anō ki aia hoki. I te me mitu ana tēnei taku nei kauhau pēnei ana te āhuatanga. Toi tū taiao, toi tū te taioi, toi tū te treaty. Tēnā koe e te pika.
Gee, that translator was definitely working overtime. Now, just before we do this, I want to address an elephant in the room. Citizen Gold, did you see this coffee cart here? And if you saw this coffee cart here, at least that's a starting point. So now I do know that picture is at BP Adelaide Road after I put air in the tyres on Christmas Day on the way to Vinegar Hill, but I thought I would just at least give you an idea of where it was, and I was near the stage. So yes, I was wearing my shirt, and I did get a selfie with a Kiwi-Birb employee who didn't want to be named, but was happy for her face to be done. Now, back to the real news.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about, I mean, I don't know if anyone has seen the previous discussion I had on this bill where I just lost my shit at Karen Shaw. But yeah, I have to keep stating that the impact statement report has stated time and time again within it that there is no evidence that repealing Section 7AA is actually going to achieve what ACT wants to achieve. What it's going to do is going to put kids in a worse situation, Māori kids that are already overrepresented in foster care.
And just for those who are wondering just there, I've just shown what the camera angle that shows Karen Chow is not even in the house.
No, she's not even there.
When the second section of the debate was done, which I thought was a bit disappointing that the minister was not there. Missing in action, as some would call it.
Well, it's hardly a surprise, because let's be pretty blunt here. Karen's pretty traumatized herself. It's really clear.
Yep.
You listen to her. She has that 1,000-yard colonized Māori stare. She's, it's. If this wasn't so serious, I'd actually feel sympathy to her. But in this situation, given what she's doing, I don't.
No.
And
same
what
here.
what really makes me angry, apart from her complete lack of evidence, which Laura you've brought up, it's just everything's an assertion. Like, I've got 100 emails. Well, Karen, your own department's report from 2023, because the key thing she's saying is this is typical ACT. They will use a word that is innocuous to reset the narrative. So in this term, they're using safety. They're talking about the safety of children. And Karen says, I have been in state care. I know about it. And if one child is unsafe, that is one child too many. Now, her own department showed in 2022, there were 895 harm incidents. Now, I don't know what a harm incident is, but it doesn't sound very good. It doesn't sound like rainbow and lollipops and moonbeams and everything. And that happened to 519 children, the vast majority who were Māori. So let's park the thing that her party is racist. Let's just park that for the moment. Let's just go to her fig leaf of safety. It's not even safe in her own damn department. And this is why, if anything, my own view is, Whakawai Research spent a lot of time, you're quite right, under the Key government to put work into what became 7AA.
Yep.
But what we actually wanted was not some whiffly partnership that the chief executive could accept or could, look at an invitation to work with hapore, iwi, hapu Māori, but then decide not to. Because we don't think that partnership's appropriate here. The only thing that's appropriate is tino rangatiratanga. This is a clear example of the exercise of tino rangatiratanga. And Oranga Tamariki, what should be repealed is not 7AA, but Oranga Tamariki and the responsibility for Māori children passed to Māori. It's that simple.
My grandma turned 97 last Tuesday and is a former primary school and secondary school teacher and associate principal of Poirua College, along with her husband, Grandad, who was principal of Te Tahi Bay Intermediate, Poirua School, Hampton Hill Primary School, Manukau Primary School, over different periods of time. Grandma estimates at least tens of thousands, if not potentially 100,000 children could have been misplaced by the predecessor of Olama Tamariki in her teaching career from 1949 right up to 1990. And across that period, which Granddad retired earlier because he's older, but she has estimated that could be near 100,000.
Yeah,
that's a lot that could be in there over that period of time. And because she saw it all. I mean, you can't sit there and say it all. If you'd be completely, you'd be stupid to sit there and say you didn't if you were, been second in charge of one of New Zealand's highest Māori school, secondary schools.
Well, here's the thing. Totally agree, absolutely agree. And congratulations on your Koia's 97th. That's a fantastic thing. That's amazing to celebrate. 3 more years.
And her sister's 18 months behind her.
Wow, that's actually phenomenal.
Yeah.
The point that I'd make though, and this is something we learned out of abuse and state care, is not only the sheer volume and the sheer quantum of damaged lives that the state wrought, but the effects of that. Now, what we learned was that, and this is the huge irony, ACT with their get tough on gangs and all that sort of thing like that, the mongrel mob was created by the state in the Apuni Boys Home, which is only 1,000 metres from where I live. It's still there now, the Apuni Boys Home. We, in terms of the Crown created it. It is a reaction to institutional racism. Now, that's not an excuse for gangs, but that is an explanation. Yeah. And if you want to know where gangs came from, that is where they came from. And if you want to address gangs, you have to address the causes, not the fact that you don't like their patches.
Yes. And unfortunately, they're probably going to have to sit there and summons Sir Robert Muldoon from the dead to sit there and actually make any action.
Well, he got on very well with Ray Harris from the Black Power.
Yeah.
And again, what he... Yeah, it's he's a controversial and a complex figure, but he, this is something that he recognised people that have been displaced, and he recognised people that they were actually highly capable. And one of his comments was, if Ray Harris had been in a different environment, he probably would have been doing his job.
While we're on this weird note, let's head to Joseph Mooney.
And heard from 117 submitters in 38 written submissions, and heard from 117 submitters in person. And I thank all of those submitters for making themselves heard to the committee. And Madam Speaker, our committee listened carefully to those submitters, and we have recommended by majority a change to the repeal of Section 7AA. Which and I want to acknowledge the Minister who has also listened to those submitters and has indicated there will be a change to the repeal of Section 7AA to incorporate a component of it. Madam Speaker, fundamentally this bill was about making sure that Oranga Tamariki focus on its primary duties, which is the care and protection of young people, making sure they are safe from harm. I would hope everyone in this House and in this country agrees with that objective. Madam Speaker, fundamentally as a country, I don't think we should want any of our children to have to come into state care. Ultimately, we want our children to be safe in their family, with their families, safe in their communities. But unfortunately, that is not always the case, Madam Speaker, and the state does have to step in and help on occasion. And that is why we do have the Oranga Tamariki, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, this bill is to just make sure that Oranga Tamariki focuses on that core primary duty, the care and protection of young people. However, we did hear many submitters, Madam Speaker, who expressed concerns about one component in particular, and that was this repeal removing the obligation on the Chief Executive to have strategic partnerships with iwi. I note that the bill did not prevent Oranga Tamariki from retaining its current strategic partnerships or from entering into new ones. However, there was concern expressed from a number of submitters that they were concerned it wouldn't continue without an obligation. So the committee heard that, the Minister has clearly heard that, and we have recommended that there be a change to this bill to make sure this obligation remains in the Act, and that is going to happen, Madam Speaker. So submitters have been heard, and that change is going to happen. And I should note, Madam Speaker, that it was the committee as a majority, so the government members agreed to that change, to listen to the submitters, to listen to the request that the obligation remain, and to keep it in the bill. I note that the opposition members did not recommend that back and did not agree with that, Madam Speaker, and that I think needs to be put on the record in this House. And that, Madam Speaker, I think reflects to the unfortunate weaponisation of this bill to stir up fear in the Māori community across New Zealand about this government, about to create, frankly, misinformation about the objectives of this government, Madam Speaker. This is a government that cares about Māori deeply. It cares about Māori children deeply. It cares about the future of children. And unfortunately, Madam Speaker, there has been a lot of misinformation about this. So there's no the fundamental core things about this are staying, Madam Speaker, and yet we're still hearing speeches telling New Zealanders that this is taking away the rights and removing the fertility obligations, etc. Strategic partnerships, the main thing that was raised as concern, the obligation on the Chief Executive to remain strategic partnerships is going to remain, Madam Speaker. So I really ask, what is the opposition talking about? Madam Speaker, I should mention one other point. There's some concerns were raised about reporting obligations. I'll just run through the reporting obligations that there currently are. There is an annual report pursuant to the Public Finance Act 1989, which measures performance against standards agreed as part of annual appropriations. Secondly, there's a quarterly report. Thirdly, there's a Safety and Children in Care annual report. Fourthly, there's a Minister of Children's report every 3 years to Parliament in Section 44(8)(b) of the Oranga Tamariki Act on whether existing legislation, government policy and other accountability documents are meeting the needs of children and young people, particularly Tamariki and rangatahi Māori. In addition, Madam Speaker, there's an independent children's monitor which produces the following reports. 1, a State of Oranga Tamariki system report at least once every 3 years. 2, an annual report in compliance with national care standards regulations. 3, an annual report on outcomes for Māori children and young people and their whānau. And Madam Speaker, it's not just that. If we look at Section 4, there's no changes to Section 4 of the Oranga Tamariki Act. No changes, Madam Speaker. And I note that this is recognised as mana tamaiti, tamariki, whakapapa, and the practice of whanaungatanga for children and young persons who come to the attention of the Department, maintaining and strengthening the relationship between children and young persons who come to the attention of the Department and their family, whānau, hapu, iwi, and family group, and siblings. That's still there, Madam Speaker. That is never going to change. That is not changing. So again, I ask the opposition members, what on earth are they telling the people of New Zealand? What on earth are they telling Māori communities across New Zealand? They need to be responsible, Madam Speaker, and be honest about what is happening. This is simply about ensuring that Oranga Tamariki focuses on its primary duties to ensure the safety of children and its care, Madam Speaker. It is not changing everything else about the importance of connection to their whakapapa, importance of connection to their family, importance of connection to their iwi, importance of connection to their hapu, importance of strategic partnerships with the Oranga Tamariki. So be honest. Be honest. I would urge them, be honest, and don't strike fear unnecessarily into the communities across New Zealand. Be honest with this country. Be honest about what is happening and what we're doing here. So, Madam Speaker, with that, I would say I recommend this bill with the amendments that we have recommended by government majority, to retain the strategic partnerships as an obligation with iwi. That is, government majority has recommended that, and I would commend this bill on that basis to the House.
Yeah, is he going to be honest about the fact that Christopher Cuxon pretty much threw Māori under the bus to get into power? Is he going to be honest about that? Because that's effectively what they've done.
I think Sulu Kilo Papa India Golf is going to be landing at Wellington Airport at about 10:30 tonight at this rate.
Yeah, well, I'm actually at Wellington Airport tonight. I've got to take off the lines on the runway, so if I have anything to do with it, it won't be taking off. But parking that for the moment, I want to take front on Joseph Mooney's gross hypocrisy, because I do not like hypocrisy. And he's talking about, what is the opposition doing, giving this false news, false information? What are they telling people? Well, Joseph, what they're doing is they're actually talking to Māori, something that you and your government did not do. So if you had have talked to Māori, which you didn't, then I would have the slightest bit of sympathy for you. But I don't. And what's more, for you to say, and we've given you this tidbit and this tidbit and this tidbit, and you should be grateful for it. How much white privilege does the National Party exude before the whole House just reeks of their racism?
I ironically was in front of a select committee in front of him on Monday. I don't rate him with the same level of respect I rate James Meagher. And it's interesting because I felt like there was that hypocrisy, even that the bill that I was submitting on was about benefit sanctions and with nothing to do with the removal of Section 7A. But I got that feeling was just like, this guy's not in reality land.
Yeah, well, he's someone that sort of promotes himself as, I've come out of nothing, I came out of a tough life, blah, 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 blah. I got myself through law school. Well, to be honest, mate, you're a bit of a bloody disappointment. Because for you to get into the House and make a speech like that and fail to admit when you actually castigate other people for trying to consult with Māori when your government refuses to, and then you throw us some scraps, which we should be grateful for, and then you tell us you love us. You remind me of these evangelical Christians that God loves you, but he doesn't like what you're doing, but he really wants your money because he's a bit short at the moment.
You don't give him the money, you go to hell. He loves you though.
Yeah, exactly. But if you give us the money, you'll go to hell. Oh, sorry, you won't go to hell. And hell's a bad place because it's full of people from Te Pāti Māori.
Yeah, I can picture that actually literally being said.
I thought it was very weird that he said, we love Maori, but they're doing all the other stuff. It was.
Boy, we love Māori.
Yeah.
We love you because you're useful politically. We throw you under the bus and we get into power.
Yeah. Okay, let's kick off to the opposition side of the bench. Carmel Sepuloni.
That is, government majority has recommended that, and I would commend this bill on that basis to the House.
Honourable Carmel Sepuloni.
Madam Speaker, very difficult to listen to that last speaker. And for him calling out to the opposition and asking us to be honest, that side of the House and that chair of the committee needs to be honest, because we sat through over 3,000 submissions with the vast majority opposing this bill, with Māori organisation, after iwi organisation, after Christian Social Service, after Children's Commissioner, and many, many credible submitters telling us that this was the wrong thing to do. And actually, I think that chair of the committee knew the whole way along that this was the wrong thing to do and felt deeply uncomfortable with the fact that he was forced to do this because of the weak leadership of his Prime Minister and the fact that they signed up to this in a coalition agreement with the ACT Party. So perhaps the chair of the Social Services and Community Committee is the person who needs to be honest about how he feels about this legislation, what we heard from the submitters, the evidence that was put in front of us, and the fact that we were all overwhelmingly presented with a strong case against getting rid of 7AA, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is another sad example of that minister ignoring advice and evidence. That minister has said on a number of occasions that her primary consideration is the safety and the well-being of children in care. No one would argue with that being the primary consideration. I agree with the chair of our select committee that we should, and I believe all do care about our children and want them to be safe. But in this particular instance, ideology is overriding the evidence base. And we're in a position where a decision has been made and we are confronted with legislation that sadly does not put the well-being of our children first, front and foremost. Madam Chair, there was an opportunity to actually take the components of 7AA and actually put them throughout the legislation in a different way, but to ensure that all of that was still included in the legislation. But that wasn't enough, and that certainly wasn't what the minister wanted. I think she has a different agenda from her leader of her party. I believe the leader of her party just refuses to acknowledge that anything Māori specific, anything Māori informed, anything that Māori say is good for Māori, he refuses to accept that that is true. And where does that get us? Well, that doesn't take us any further. In fact, it takes us backwards, because for far too long, Māori voices have been ignored when it comes to the well-being and welfare of Māori children. Only at the end of last year were we sitting in this House, all looking and feeling very forlorn and regretful, disgusted in so many ways, about the abuse in state care that has occurred under the watch of consecutive governments. And then, as one submitter, Bernie O'Donnell, said today in Select Committee, it's like Groundhog Day. Here we are again, after an apology has been made by government, implementing policies that actually replicate the mistakes that have led to the endangerment, that have led to intergenerational harm and trauma, predominantly for Māori. And here we are doing that again, Madam Chair, and it actually makes me sad. And we listened to the submissions that came through. It wasn't just organisations, iwi, health providers, social service providers. We had many survivors of abuse speaking to this bill, talking about their experience in state care, talking about the fact that not only had they, in many instances, experienced physical, verbal, psychological, sexual abuse, but they had been denied access to what they should have had the right to access their whole lives, that being their whānau, their whakapapa, their reo and their culture. And here we are again, taking that away from another generation of children. Well, how did that serve us, Aotearoa? How did that serve us, every politician in this House, when that was continually done over the course of decades under the watch and under the approval and sanctioning of this particular whare? And I think that the members that are supporting this bill should be ashamed of themselves for perpetuating the harm that we have only so clearly been informed about, that we have been clearly told about, that we clearly know about, that was brought about by actions like we are seeing today. I want to remind that member, Joseph Mooney, who continues to interject on my speech, that 7AA was something that was introduced by a former National Party minister. It was Anne Tolley that introduced 7AA. And speaking to my colleague, the Honourable Willie Jackson, he spoke to me about the fact that Minister Anne Tolley at the time took seriously the insights and experience and intelligence of people like Taria Naturia. Took seriously the evidence that was put in front of her. She paid attention and she included that specific section in the legislation because she was open-minded, because she had the common sense to understand that actually it was something that was integral to ensuring the safety of our children moving forward. And it made me reflect that actually there were a few ministers under that key-led government who weren't entirely wrong, and they did do some good things. And it makes me feel very disappointed with this current government, particularly the national members, because that legacy of, at times, working with Māori, honouring te tiriti, seems to be something that has been lost under the leadership of Christopher Luxon because he simply has not been able to stand up to his coalition partners. So, Madam Speaker, we oppose this bill, and it doesn't matter how many times the chairperson of the Social Services Committee yells out that we've kept strategic relationships in here as something important. It does not encompass or ensure the full breadth of what was enabled through Section 7AA, and that member knows it really well. It is limited, and what we will see as a result is our children are disadvantaged and our children's safety and well-being put at risk as a result. Madam Speaker, we oppose this bill. To the members of the public that may be watching this House, please listen to the speeches, but also read the submissions, see the overwhelming evidence for yourself, see the overwhelming number of people that actually oppose this bill and the intelligent and informed arguments that they put forward. Don't just believe us. Look at what we were presented with and then know that the government members chose to ignore each and every one of those submissions that clearly outlined why this bill should not be supported. We oppose this bill.
Well, she cooked. She cooked. Yeah, so let's go over the timeline. So why are lots of Māori ending up in foster care? Well, first, Māori were alienated from their land. They had that taken away from them. The land was the way how they developed wealth and generated money, and they lost that ability. So they lost the means to be able to look after their mokopuna. And because of the stress of working in a shitty job, like a factory job or whatever in urban areas, right? That trickles down to abuse and neglect towards children. Those children end up in state care, and round and round and round and round we go. So, Section 7AA is literally just scraps, right? In comparison to what the Crown did and how much they profited off taking away Māori's ability to produce their own economic wealth and look after their own. So James Mooney is up here saying, what's the problem? There you go. That's the problem.
Yeah, we can even jump in a bit more than that. Let's actually turn James Mooney's stuff on the head. If he says the main thing is the strategic partnerships, which is what he said, and everything else is small beer, well, then it shouldn't be any problem just leaving it in.
Yeah.
Should be absolutely no problem. I mean, if it was something that was major, but he says it's not major. So his entire argument is disingenuous. Yeah. And I want to pick up, Laura, on your economic analysis. I mean, again, when I'm asked about, Peter, can you explain New Zealand economic history in less than 2 hours? And I can say I can do it in less than 20 words. And this is New Zealand's economic history. It's based on two things. It's based on bonanza capitalism, where we cash in our natural resources, whether it be whales or seals or gold or et cetera, et cetera. If we go to the 21st century, the latest version of it is called dairy farming, and we're cashing in our water. So that is the modus of New Zealand economic development. It's periodic sessions of bonanza capitalism. The second thing is systematic asset stripping of its Indigenous people. Now, once you have asset stripped the Indigenous people, what you then do is you put in place through whether it be education mechanisms, legal mechanisms that are based on institutional racism that are systematically designed to detribalize, decolonize, and de-Maorify. And I think that's very important because what ACT is reacting to is from the 1970s has been the growth of what Europeans call the Māori Renaissance. And you got the ACT people of the world who moan about the Maorification of New Zealand. And if you happen to pronounce a Maori place name like Wakatani properly, then they kind of lose their minds.
Yeah, I know.
Now this is where I think this becomes really important, is that what you need to understand is what ACT is about. And here's the really dangerous thing. National is the enabler.
Yep.
ACT is the problem. National is the enabler. Now, what we learnt from Nuremberg is I was just a guard and watched is not a great argument in international law. Now, when we look at this idea about de-Maorification, what we can then look is at the narrative setting the ACT Party uses. Oranga Tamariki Bill is not about the safety of children. The Treaty Principles Bill is not about equality.
Yeah.
Removing Maori wards in local government is not about democracy. And the Regulatory Standards Bill is not about efficiency. It's about the de-Maorification of New Zealand. It is based on neo-colonialist thought.
Yeah.
It is neo-assimilist in nature, and it's fundamentally rooted in white supremacy. And that's the simple fact. And again, we can overthink these things, but that's the reality.
Austrian
That's
economics.
Let's address another elephant in the room. Just remember, Kiwi Skirt, I've been up since 2 a.m. this morning, and apart from an hour's sleep from 5:30 to 6:30, it has been a long day. I have done 3 trips in each direction over Raroa Road through Arrow Valley towing trailers. And I've also been to Upper Hutt and back to drop off the generator, which was one of them before getting here tonight for the show. So, yeah, just that particular one. And the last time you would have seen me like this was when I did a Faro Bay school fair, which was back in November. And that's the reason why when Newtown Festival comes up in 2 days' time, Laura's being handed the driver's seat for the night.
Don't worry, I won't glitch out like last time.
It's all right. Yeah. Let's kick off to what I'm unsure whether it is seat warmer or not. I've decided because of the seriousness of the bill, we won't do a seat warmer compilation. So, but this could be a seat warmer speech.
That's his middle name. Seat warmer. That's his middle name.
We oppose this bill.
Mike Butterick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I note from the Select Committee report there were a large number of submitters, and I note also that the committee thanked everyone who submitted for their time and care they put into their written and oral submissions. And they also acknowledged the many submitters who spoke to them from their own personal experience within the care system and thanked them for sharing their stories. And I know it would have been a harrowing experience for many, and I would also acknowledge all who contributed from both sides of the table. The safety of our children should always be paramount. As a father of 4, my wife and I have strived to provide a loving, nurturing and safe environment for them. And I know there wouldn't be a person in this House who doesn't want the same for their children and for all children in this country, for them to be safe, to be loved, to be cared for, to be nurtured and ultimately to have opportunities in life. This bill seeks to make sure that those criteria are first and foremost the absolute priority, to enable Oranga Tamariki Ministry for Children to renew its focus on the safety and well-being of children in care arrangements. Every child deserves the same level of care and support based on their individual needs and their safety and well-being put first before other considerations. And while this bill repeals references to cultural considerations in section 7AA, it does not remove existing provisions in other parts of the Act that require decision makers to consider cultural factors in care decisions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
And it that does feel very seat warmer. And just to confirm, Mike Butterick is not on the Social Services and Community Select Committee. I wonder if he has been roped in at the last minute to step in to do that speech.
Looks like it.
It looked like he was literally reading notes. I mean, it's just what it is, but he probably got roped in at last minute.
I was just going to say, every time I hear, bit of a funny one, every time I hear my butter, I think of Mo from The Simpsons.
Yeah. My dad actually had an interesting one. Peter mentioned earlier about how Reform and United formed the National Party. My granddad's cousin married the son of George Sykes, MP for Masterton, who was part of the Reform Party that later became National. Mike Butterick had no clue who the hell George Sykes was. He was not really clued up enough on his National Party history when he was failed at that time to win the seat of Wairarapa in 2020. This was 2021 when Dad had this interesting conversation with Mike.
Is Mike clued up on anything? Like, I have emailed him before, and he just gives the most milquetoast responses. I'll go, hey, there's a problem with this bill. How do you respond? And he's like, oh, this is our policy. Okay, what do you think? I'm asking you what you think, man. This is our policy as a party. Okay.
This is what I'm saying about the quality of the National Party. I mean, the fact that in an entire caucus they can only find someone like Chris Luxon to lead them. What else do you really need to know? As I said, when you look back at some of the incredible statesmen that have been in the National Party, and it's just a dearth. You've got the likes of Sam Uffindell, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
How does someone like that even get in?
How does David Seymour even get in? Look at his history on Snapchat.
Yes, but remember that history was after he became an MP and the leader of the party. He might have hypocrisy immunity.
Yeah, I mean, as where I go back to is, I mean, one of the observations I gave to, again, within the Māori Council about 18 months, 2 years ago, was I said, look, you've got a really difficult position coming up here, because the choice we've got is between nice but, to be quite blunt, useless, and just plain nasty and racist. And I said, that's not a hell of a choice. Now I said, here's my call. I'd rather go with nice but useless, because you can always hope that useless gets better, but nasty just is. And national is nasty. It just is.
When you get those very vague responses, Laura, it reminds me of that they probably don't agree with what a lot of the party is pushing.
They probably don't even know what they agree with, because they haven't been told yet. They don't know. I mean, it's quite clear that there's a lot of people in the National Party that have outsourced their thinking to something like the New Zealand Institute.
Yep.
Yeah.
They can't act. They're not capable of thinking for themselves. They are just a walking meme machine with sound bites.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
Yeah, that's been pretty much my experience with Mike. He's just it's
like,
push the button, you get this response.
From what I remember Jill sitting there and saying, to try and get rid of Kieran, you basically got rid of the nice full cream milk and replaced it with trim and tried to claim it's better.
Well, at least with Kieran, I actually got a response.
Hey, I remember when I PCC'd him about making if they'll go to toll the Manawatu Tamariki highway was to sit down there and make Paitoa Track an extension of State Highway 57 and make the Seal Road State Highway 3B in my submission. Kieran Kieran actually responded, thank you for that submission, and I like the fact that you've even went to the point of asking them to be national state highways and giving them numbers to use, literally putting the idea in their head. Yeah. So, let's see what Willie Jackson has got to say, because he's always interesting when he comes on these issues.
Honourable Willie Jackson, this is a split call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to congratulate our Deputy Leader, Kamau Sepuloni. This is a terrible bill for Māori, and I'm listening to Joseph Mooney, and it goes against what the National Party, Madam Speaker, I should say, believed some years ago. This was a kōrero that was a very deep kōrero with people like Anne Tolley and Bill English, who work with the Māori Party in terms of getting this up. They got this up because they heard all the horror stories, Madam Speaker. Our Deputy Leader talked about Bernie O'Donnell, for instance, who submitted. Bernie's one of my closest friends in life, Madam Speaker. He worked, he's an example of what went wrong in terms of the system. He was moved from family to family to family when he was a kid, and then found out his Māori side later on. Tamariki was the whānau. But it wasn't until he found out about his taha Māori side that his life changed. And so he comes to the committee knowing that there's been a history in terms of the National Party having supported what he went through. And the sad thing about this is that this is something that the ACT Party have put in place and is part of their agenda. And that's what I find particularly sad here, because I know there are very good members on the other side who at another time would not support this. They would not support this. They would have supported the John Key strategy. And I have to say, I want to be clear on this, having been at the coalface, having gone in and taken babies from whānau, abusive whānau, that Te Ao Māori used to debate this all the time too. Because in the end, all we want is for those kids to be safe. We're all agreed on that. But what we realise from everyone we talk to all our providers, with all our Māori Party crew, with all our National Party crew, with all our Labour Party crew, we realise that if we instilled that whakapapa, if we entrenched it in terms of legislation, it would make a difference. It would make a difference. That making it an absolute priority that these babies go to where their whakapapa is, that would make a major change in their lives. And these abused people, these poor souls, one by one, in fact, when we got into the hundreds, told us if they only knew where their whakapapa was, if they only knew who their family was, it would have been a huge change in life. But then we get this ACT Party coming in with all these stupid ideas that go against everything that the National Party believed in, and all of a sudden the National Party changes. It is a sad day. You're changing it, all right, because all our groups are saying that now these kids will get lost in the system. That's what Kamau Sepuloni's saying. That's what we're saying. The dangers are that these kids won't go to the whakapapa, won't go to the whānau who they should be with, and they will have a whole loss of identity. That's what our people are saying, Joseph Mooney. Why don't you listen to what Māori groups are saying? Why don't you listen to what iwi are saying? Why don't you listen to what John Key, Bill English and Anne Tolley said, that this was exactly the right type of legislation to get in place so that we could turn things around. You know, I'm proud of what they did in those days. I'm proud of the bipartisan approach that was taken by National Māori Party, Labour at the time. And then all of a sudden it's thrown out because of these idiots on the other side who are attacking Māori things, Māori kaupapa, every day, every week. And that's why our former Minister, Willow Jean Prime, is so offended with what this Minister is doing. Madam Speaker, the government, this coalition government, is being led around by David Seymour, who is just playing them all the time, and we're seeing the results of that. They're being played badly, and the results of that, Madam Speaker, is that they're the most unpopular government in recent times. No one has seen a government so far behind the polls. But I've got some advice for the government. Keep doing what you're doing, because you're already way behind in the polls, and it's only going to get worse. So keep attacking us because we're doing well, and Māori and most of New Zealand are sickier. Kia ora, Madam Speaker.
Oh, he's so funny. He's so funny. He never fails to make me laugh. Matua Willie Jackson. But yeah, I've met people of older generations who were Māori people who were raised in foster care, who have lost connections to their extended family. They don't know where they've come from. They don't know their whakapapa. They don't know any of that. They've been cut off completely. And part of Oranga Tamariki's Section 7AA, the legislation, that piece of legislation was designed to prevent that from happening, preventing that break from happening, keeping kids in touch with the extended whānau. And yes, quite often that involves having the community, their hapu, helping to raise them so they don't lose that part of themselves. It's not racist to point that out. It's racist to take the kids away from it.
Ron Mark's brother wasn't a classic example of Ron Mark got himself in the army. His brother ended up in the pipeline to prison. And a lot of that has been associated with the foster care system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's an example of like, yeah, we know where Ron Mark is, you know, probably one of the best mayors of Castleton. Not sure whether him or Georgina is the best Māori mayor, considering they're the only two who hold the title. But, as I say, not everyone is fortunate to end up in how Ron Mark has actually ended up going. And actually, one who's been through the foster care system, I actually have a hell of a lot more respect for than, say, Karen Chow.
But it's like your hapu is your whanaunga. It's like, that's your family. Why is this government so insistent on breaking up families? Why wouldn't you put a foster kid into someone else's family within the hapu?
Yeah.
Because what you want to do is what the Crown has done since the Education Act of 1870. It's about detribalisation of Māori and destroying a unique Māori identity. So remember I talked about an asset stripping in terms of physical assets. This is the asset stripping of a soul. That is what David Seymour is doing. That is why he is so evil. Now, we've talked about the likes of Anne Tolley and Bill English and co. I want to talk about the Westie made good. Well, and now real estate agent, and my mother watches her on those god-awful afternoon television programs, Paula Bennett. Now, Paula Bennett, again, was someone who had challenges with her Māori identity. Mm-hmm. And that clearly came through, is that she had one hell of a chip on her shoulder. And she was one that basically said, I got out of the gutter, so therefore everyone else can. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I'm going to take away all the ladders while I'm at the top of it. Oh. That's Paula Bennett. That's Paula Bennett in a nutshell. But Paula Bennett shocked iwi leaders when she came in and gave them a speech about 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And she listed Ngāpuhi. She said, how many Ngāpuhi children were with SIFs? Because it was SIFs back then. She then went through Ngāti Porou. This is how many you've got. Tainui. This is how many you've got. You've got all these treaty settlements. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about your children? Why are they in state care? And now we are going back to, so Māori have responded. What Māori wanted was no Oranga Tamariki, because we don't trust it. It's another racist Crown institution with a few nice bits put around it that we try and take it, which tries to keep some accountability around it. I mean, the fact is that the chief executive, Joseph Mooney's bit that he says is so great, that all it says is that the chief executive can consider an invitation from iwi or hapu or hapore, but he or she does not have to follow up on it. So the ultimate power and the ultimate veto retains with the Crown. So why I think Section 7AA is worth fighting for and worth keeping, to be honest, it shouldn't be there at all, because Oranga Tamariki should not be there at all.
It's
and
the
what
ambulance
we should
at
be
the bottom
doing,
of the cliff.
I mean, this is where the Seymours of the world are, and the Paula Bennetts of the world are very good about, Māori, stand up, step up to the plate, you do something. So the minute we do something, they rip it down, because you then get the David Seymours that say Māori doing anything is about Māorification, and we cannot have Māorification in New Zealand.
We can't have too much equity.
Yeah,
we just can't have too many Māori.
Yeah, it's like pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Oh, you pulled them off. Sorry, I've got to confiscate them. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Sorry. Yeah, I know I confiscated them, but you still got to do it. Just because I took them away, that's not a good enough excuse. Let's see what Suze Redmayne has had to say. She is also not a member of the Social Services Select Committee.
Suze Redmayne.
Speaker. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Minister Karen Shaw for championing this bill.
No, we won't make
personal. She can sit down again.
Under particularly harrowing circumstances, sometimes I might add. Even before she became an MP, Minister Shaw was hearing about the unintended...
Sorry, can we
That's all
start
right.
the speaker's time again? Let me make it very clear that you can make comments about the government and the parties, but don't make personal attacks about individuals. Thank you. Suze Redmayne.
Thank you. Even before she became an MP, Minister Chua was hearing about the unintended consequences of Section 7A of the Oranga Tamariki Act. She saw the focus on maintaining Māori children's whakapapa sometimes put young people at risk because their placements were based on race and not first and foremost on their well-being, their care and their protection. Madam Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Social Services Select Committee for their work on the bill. And I also want to extend my thanks to all submitters. Their input is critical to us getting it right for New Zealand children. While I wasn't on the Select Committee, I've reviewed the report and I rise today in support of the repeal of Section 7AA. The bill represents a necessary step to refocus Oranga Tamariki on its fundamental responsibility, ensuring the safety, stability and well-being of children in their care. Section 7AA as it stands has led to unintended consequences which compromise the welfare of children that it's aimed at protecting.
Too much
By
equity.
repealing Section 7AA, Oranga Tamariki will be free from any conflict between cultural obligations and child welfare decisions. As my colleague Joseph Mooney clearly articulated, this bill does not eliminate cultural considerations, as opposition members would have you believe. This bill does not remove existing provisions in other parts of the Act which require decision makers to consider cultural factors in care decisions. The bill also retains obligations on the Chief Executive of OT to develop and maintain strategic partnerships with iwi and Māori organisations and encourages those organisations to seek out opportunities for partnership. Madam Speaker, this repeal reinforces the paramount responsibility of Oranga Tamariki, which must always be ensuring the safety, stability, well-being of all children in their care. I commend this bill to the House.
Shannon Hilbert.
Okay.
Is she drunk too?
Sorry?
Is she tipsy as well? That was
Who
not a
knows?
good speech from James. What is she talking about? I'm so confused.
Yeah,
As
well,
I
she's
say, got handed
I
the speech to fill in the gaps.
yeah, well, she's clearly another gap filler. She's the MP for Rangitike. What's really interesting is Mokai Pātea spans Rangitike. So from a Māori perspective, she is the MP there, and that's pretty bloody appalling.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely appalling. There is, to keep on talking about, what is she? Is she part of the Karen Shaw fan club?
I don't know. That was
it's just pathetic and actually quite sickening.
Yeah.
Because she seems to be more worried about the minister on a $250,000 a year salary than the damn kids.
Yeah.
And she then pulls this with completely no evidence of unintended consequences. Yet here are the consequences with, there seems to be, there's a very strong racist underpinning to her language. And it's basically those Maoris are bad and those Maoris beat up their kids. What about the 895 harm incidents across 519 children in 2022 at the hands of Oranga Tamariki?
Yeah.
What are you doing, MP for Rangitike, about that when you
I don't know, she's
don't
supporting
even
more kids
acknowledge
going
it?
into that.
And that
know
is
the
a
show
fact.
exists.
And what she is chasing is some sort of anecdote. It's the same as Karen Chow's, I've got 100 emails. Well, show them to us. Oh, no, I can't do that. Okay, you've just made it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got
I don't know, maybe she
absolutely
wants more
nothing.
kids to get abused and stay here. I have no idea what the hell she wants or what she stands for. All I know is that there was a lot of glazing for Karen in that speech.
Okay. We're going to run out of time if we don't switch to this. So let's kick over to the urgent debate on the from the resignation from Health New Zealand.
This ought to be fun.
Oh yes, and urgent debates are not. I like urgent debates. They're very good to cover because they give us a lot of good ratings.
And this is why Sam asked me to come.
Yeah.
We're not having those discussions, so the hallways just keep moving. Call on the Honourable Penny Henry.
Tēnā, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if National's idea of leadership is chaos, confusion and empty promises, they're on track for a clean sweep in health. But the real losers here are everyday Kiwis. There are some givens in our community. Kiwis who are unwell expect to get health care. Kiwis who need to see a doctor expect to be able to see a doctor. Kiwis who need emergency health care expect and deserve to get it. Mr. Speaker, the same can be said. If you are one of the 90,000 workers in our health sector in Te Whatuora, you should be able to expect two things. One, that there is a clear health plan, something that you can focus on, something you can deliver and hold yourself accountable to. The other thing they expect, Mr. Speaker, is clear leadership. Clear leadership. And we are not seeing that from this government. And we've just seen, Mr. Speaker, in the last few days that we have received the resignation of Margie Upper. And just in recent hours, in the recent day, Mr. Speaker, another resignation of another senior health official, and Dr. Jones. Mr. Speaker, this is a problem for New Zealanders. This says that under this government, the leadership is walking away from the most important and critical sector of our country, the health sector, Mr. Speaker. And what do we know about leadership is it starts at the very top. What we know is that this government has continued to change and undermine the leadership of health in this country and have left it in chaos, Mr. Speaker. We know that Margie Upper's resignation, Dr. Jones's resignation, are only two of the high-profile ones. We know that there are so many more in the health sector who have already walked away. And where do they go, Mr. Speaker? Well, we know a large amount of them have gone to Australia. They've gone to Australia and they've gone overseas to look for health opportunities because they are not cared for, they are not respected, and they do not have the leadership they deserve here in their own country, Mr. Speaker. We know that leadership starts at the top. What we can say is, sadly for Margie Upper, her leadership was undermined from the very start. From this government who came into power, they made it very clear that they did not back Margie Upper. Mr. Speaker, the former health minister was asked whether or not he had confidence in Margie Upper and her leadership, Mr. Speaker, and he made it clear that he didn't. In fact, he tried to brush off his responsibility as the health minister, simply saying that, oh, that's for the board to worry about. Mr. Speaker, I come back to the point. Health and leadership starts at the very top, Mr. Speaker. Then what happens is Mr. Reti, the former minister, appoints a commissioner in health, another person who will not publicly back our senior health official, continually undermine our senior health official. That simply is not good enough for New Zealanders or for the large health sector workforce. And not only did the commissioner undermine Margie Upper, he also did it publicly. He did it in select committee hearings, he did it through the media, and refused a one-on-one conversation to support Margie Upper in the important role that she had to lead our health sector, Mr. Speaker. What we know is that the national health system is on its knees. It's in chaos. And what we have not seen from this government or the leadership is a plan on where they're taking the health sector. Mr. Speaker, we've had a change of minister. And in this time, for the most critical sector in New Zealand, the minister has yet to spell out a plan, has yet to even back his leadership to make sure that the health sector has the leadership that it deserves, Mr. Speaker. In fact, there are so many more questions, but we want to focus on the reason for this urgent debate, Mr. Speaker. And that is that Mr. Simeon Brown, as the Minister of Health, has failed to support the leadership. And what we know, Mr. Speaker, is Kiwis have a long memory. They'll look at this current minister and this current government and know that they aren't getting the services that they need and they deserve, Mr. Speaker. What we know from this government so far, the plan is this: underfunding, understaffing. And now we see from the very top resignations in our leadership, Mr. Speaker, continually undermining the health sector in this country. What might Kiwis be able to expect from this minister, Mr. Speaker? Well, if this continues, the question must be asked, will he resign? Because if the leadership cannot get on with the important job of leading the health sector in this country, it comes back to the point I made earlier about the leadership starting at the very top. And what this country is not seeing from this minister or this government is that leadership. Mr. Speaker, there was large bluster at the beginning of last year about making health amazing, bringing it back on track. Well, Mr. Speaker, this government has failed to do that. And now we see with recent resignations that they will struggle to have the leadership to be able to do that now and into the future, Mr. Speaker. A person like Margie Upper, a person like Dr. Jones aren't easily replaceable, Mr. Speaker. We know that their leadership for this country through the COVID pandemic was absolutely critical in the world-class response that this country had in responding to COVID and the pandemic, Mr. Speaker. Margie Upper has led health initiatives across Auckland, the biggest city in this country. She's made sure that they receive the health care that they deserve in her time leading that particular region. She then steps into the job of leading this country, Mr. Speaker, and she did a fantastic job. In fact, by my reckon, Mr. Speaker, and in my time as an Associate Health Minister, she was instrumental in making sure that Kiwis got the health care that they deserve. Now, did Margie Upper get the support that she deserved? The answer is no. Now, did Margie Upper and her leadership team get the support that they deserve from this government? The answer is absolutely not. They were used as a scapegoat. Eventually, Mr. Speaker, this government will run out of people to blame for the state of our healthcare, Mr. Speaker. They will continue to run out of people to blame because leaders in the health sector are walking away from their passion, the sector that they're most passionate about, because of a failure of leadership from this government. Now, Mr. Speaker, we've heard a lot from this government, looking back and blaming Labour and blaming past governments, Mr. Speaker. We stood up during a difficult time through COVID-19. Furthermore, we provided a clear direction for the health sector. We provided leadership for the health sector. And what have we got from the other side? Cuts, underfunding, understaffed. Mr. Speaker, what we've also seen in recent times from this government is a flip-flop on targets in health. They told the country that we're going to give you timely health care. And then all of a sudden they realise, oh, It actually requires strong leadership, and then we're not going to be able to deliver on that. So we see a turn back or a wind back on their promises to this country with respect to healthcare, Mr. Speaker. Once again, this starts at the very top. So there are questions that Minister Brown must answer for Kiwis today. What is the plan? Why doesn't he back the leadership of our health sector? Why isn't Mr. Brown providing a plan to this country to bring our health sector back to a world-class health sector that our country deserves, Mr. Speaker? For the last part of my contribution, I want to acknowledge Margie Upper. I want to acknowledge Dr. Nicholas Jones. And I want to acknowledge all of the healthcare workers in this country who are doing it tough. They have a government that doesn't back them. They have a government that continually pulls the rug out from underneath them to provide healthcare for this country. Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge Margie Upper, Dr. Jones for their leadership and their leadership through difficult times in this country. My hope is that in their new endeavours, their new chapter, they receive the support that they so richly deserve as leaders of our health sector in this country, Mr. Speaker. And what we need to hear from this government is a clear plan and where they're taking our health sector. Because right now, we have workforce right up and down this country extremely unhappy in their roles, not clear on who's coming and who's going. We have a health sector that are told that they cannot actually hire more people despite being clearly stressed in their job. We know, for example, Mr. Speaker, that in one region alone, very close to this House, there are over 600 vacancies. 600 vacancies. So we have to ask the question, are Kiwis getting what they deserve in health? From this government, the answer is absolutely not. So finally, Mr. Speaker, to those who work hard in our health sector, I say thank you. Thank you for working hard in our communities. Thank you for continually looking after Kiwis every single day. This government won't back you, but I can tell you what, the Labour Party will.
Well, that's a bit of a fiery 10-minute speech from Pene Herere.
I don't know if you saw the little factoids that I put up across the screen, but that came from the New Zealand Medical Journal. That was a paper that was released last year, and I've put the link in the chat so everyone can read it. I can put it in again. Just give me 2 seconds. I've also got some stats too about targets, which I might bring up a bit later when Simeon Brown gives his speech. So there you go, guys, in the chat. There's the link. I highly recommend everyone reads it because it's quite an eye-opener, the amount of doctors that are leaving.
Yeah.
And my health hasn't been good and timely so far, just so you know.
I mean, what I think we also need to, I mean, this is kind of old news, in that since this, we've actually had the resignation of the Director General of Health as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
this is from Tuesday.
So what you've got is they sacked the entire board of Health New Zealand, replaced it with basically a used car salesman, Lester Levy, who I know from back in the days when he was running South Canterbury Health, and his claim to fame then was when hospitals had deficits, because when we corporatised hospitals back in the late mid 1990s, and actually brought in this voodoo stuff called accrual accounting, where they actually had to have proper books and a balance sheet. The first thing we found, because this is such a huge neoliberal conspiracy, the first thing we found was that all the hospitals were bankrupt. And suddenly, you know, and so Lester was famous for getting South Auckland healthcare into a surplus by basically asset sales. And he's dined out on that ever since. And he's written books. One of them is called The Whirlpool Effect. And I'm sure that's a great management text. I'm sure that's being the John F. Kennedy School of Government is no doubt using that as a key tome with a name like that. But you know, so what you've got is they've gone and sacked the board of Health New Zealand. They've now gotten rid of the chief executive. They've gotten rid of the Director General of Health, and the Director of Public Health has gone as well. I mean, there's not that many people left.
I think it says a lot, Peter, when you've got people that are resigning that were there during COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly.
They would rather deal with an overstressed system than deal with Simeon Brown. I think that's pretty clear.
And the thing,
I don't blame them.
And I mean, Simeon Brown, you know, this is where he's going to work out really quickly that you just can't do feel-good things like, okay, this is an 80-kilometre area, we're going to make it a 100-kilometre area because my constituencies like driving their ranges at 100. And the whole idea of actually taking 32 seconds longer across a 5-kilometre stretch of road is just the end of Western civilization as we know it. That sort of level of thinking doesn't work within health systems. They're really complex beasts.
Yeah. You actually do make the point, like considering Captain Expressway. the 110k speed limit is a 90-second time saving. But if you're a
Yep.
truck, there is no time saving because you're not
On a
allowed to
truck.
do more than 90 k's.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what ironically Simeon Brown's got to say.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Simeon Brown.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it took until minute 8 in that speech to actually get to the point of acknowledging and thanking Margie for her service, which shows his priorities actually when it comes to this debate. And of course, as I said on Friday, I do thank Margie for the job that she did as the CEO, the first CEO of Health New Zealand, and I do wish her well into the future. And I do acknowledge her and the team that she has been part of for the work that they have done, and the decision that she came to last week is announced by the Commissioner that she would depart from her role 4 months prior to the end of her contract, and that is a decision ultimately that she made. And ultimately, what we've heard from the opposition, though, is basically them trying to provide a lecture. What they need is a mirror, because actually, they're the ones who put our health system into turmoil. They are the ones who decided to restructure our health system during the middle of a pandemic. So stop lecturing and have a look in the mirror at what the decisions you made, that opposition made, when they were last in government. So, Mr. Speaker, let's go through their track record when it came to the health system. And the first point I'd make, because it talks about what they stopped and what we restarted. Firstly, you can't manage what you don't measure. And what was the very, very, very first thing the Labour Party did when they were elected in 2017? They removed the health targets. The health targets which demonstrated to New Zealanders whether or not they were getting the timely, quality access to healthcare that they deserve. The first thing they got rid of was those health targets. Shame on them. Look in the mirror. That was the very first thing they did. And what happened? When they stopped measuring, the results started going backwards. In 2017, if you turned up to an emergency department, 90% of people were being seen within 6 hours. When they left office, when we started recording again, it dropped below 70%. Shame on them. When it came to seeing a specialist for your first specialist assessment, 99% of New Zealanders were seeing their first specialist assessment within 4 months. That had dropped below 70% over the time that they left office. And a shame, exactly, where have they gone now? There's not a lot being said from the opposition now. When it came to elective surgeries, those critically important planned surgeries, which matter so much to our communities, particularly to our elderly. When we left office in 2017, 97.3% of New Zealanders were getting elective surgeries within 4 months. When they left office, it had dropped to 62%. Shame on them. When it comes to immunisations, and we know how important immunisations are to our children and to our tamariki. When we left office in 2017, 92.4% of New Zealanders' children were being immunised at 24 months. When we came to office, that had dropped to 77%. Shame on them. If you can't manage what you don't measure. So I'm proud of the fact this government has restored those targets. And yes, what they do is they demonstrate the state of our health system and the turmoil that it was put in under that last government and the need to improve. We're not hiding from the facts that there are significant challenges. I hear New Zealanders when they say to me, it's taking too long to see a doctor. I hear New Zealanders when they say it's taking too long to get that specialist assessment. It's taking too long when I go to ED with my child. And so this government is focused on putting the resource back into the front line rather than into the bureaucracy. They spent 3 years reallocating the bureaucrats behind closed doors, merging 20 DHBs into one, focusing on positions and job descriptions and all of that bureaucratic thing rather than on the targets and the outcomes, which is what New Zealanders, when they wake up in the morning and what they care about, when their feet hit the floor, they care about, can I see my GP? Can I get into an emergency department? Can I make sure that I can get elective surgery if I need it? That's what they care about. What the opposition care about is bureaucracy and bureaucrats, and I find that appalling. They don't care about our front line, they care about bureaucracy, and that's not something that I'm going to say about. So what have we done? We've invested another $16.68 billion additional into health services. We've hired thousands more nurses. We're focusing back on frontline service delivery for Kiwis. That's what we are doing, and that's what my expectations for Health New Zealand are to be delivering against. And I will back the frontline every single day because they are the ones who work hard, they are the ones who deliver. But what I won't stand by is bureaucracy, bureaucratic processes, and constant centralisation, which is what that government did. So here's some questions for the Labour Party to answer. Why did you remove the health targets? Tell me why. And if you're elected at some point in the future, will you remove them again? Answer the question, why did you remove them? Why did the Labour Party decide that in the middle of a pandemic, it was the right time to restructure the entire health system? Tell me why. Tell me why you did that. Why do you think that bureaucracy was more important than health outcomes? Tell the public why. Tell the public why. And why did you think that a co-governed bureaucracy was absolutely necessary at that time? More focused on bureaucracy and co-governance rather than the outcomes that New Zealanders deserve and the New Zealanders need. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thank Health New Zealand staff. I thank the leadership for what they are doing. They have a difficult and challenging job, and they are focusing on the delivery that New Zealanders deserve, the delivery that New Zealanders need. My focus as Minister of Health is to ensure that those 5 health targets are the priority for every single person working at Health New Zealand, from the CEO down to the person right down the bottom of that organisation, whatever layer they are in. The 5 health targets are our core priorities. We expect them to be delivering that. We've invested a record $16.68 billion additional into health. That is a record investment into our health system. It's above inflation. It's about making sure we're addressing those core health challenges, but we expect that money to be going to frontline services and frontline delivery, and we expect them to be focusing on delivering against those targets. So, Mr. Speaker, whilst we've heard from the other side of the House where they've talked about underfunding, that's fake news. They've talked about understaffing, more fake news. They've talked about leadership. All they're focused on is the bureaucracy. We're focused on the front line and on delivery. And, Mr. Speaker, I will be relentless in my focus on the 5 health targets and making sure New Zealanders can access their GPs. I don't stand here not conscious of the challenge in front of me and in front of this government, because we know how important this is to every single New Zealander. But I can tell you something for free to the Labour Party. Just focusing on the bureaucracy ain't going to fix it. And that's what they spent 6 years doing. I say to them, shame on them focusing on the bureaucracy rather than focusing on everyday mums and dads, children, our elderly, and delivering the health services, because the facts speak for themselves. And we will keep demonstrating the facts speak for themselves. The facts show they failed, and we are going to turn those numbers around and deliver for New Zealanders.
And should we sit down there and sing Simeon's chorus? Shame on you.
The man's an idiot. The man's a total idiot. I mean, let's actually, his whole. I mean, I hope people notice the slide between 1 minute it's health bureaucracy, which is obviously wasteful, and then the same people are suddenly health leadership, and he likes them in 1 minute, then he doesn't like them the next minute, and he thinks they should be doing leadership 1 minute, and then he wants to get rid of them the next minute. The man's an idiot.
I don't know how he's going to cope when the first strike related to his portfolio happens.
It's only a matter of time, because you're talking with people that are actually quite intelligent, and this man is a fool. I mean, his whole mantra reminds me of Mao Zedong during the Cultural Revolution, who was all about targets. I mean, how many tons of steel would we produce? Now, the fact you couldn't do anything with it was irrelevant, but how many tons could you produce? And he completely destroyed the Red Army, the People's Liberation Army as a fighting force, because he took away all of the NCOs, he took away all the officers, because these were bourgeois apologists, and said, all you need is frontline soldiers. And it wasn't until Vietnam completely pummeled them in the border war of 1979 as they realised he was a moron. He'd be dead for 3 years at the time, but his legacy went on. And that's the thing I'm concerned about. You've got a huge organisation that is complex. It needs leadership. It needs people to manage it. What I think is probably the most galling thing around it, and I think this is really brave of the last government, is they ripped apart Annette King's health system and they replaced it with Bill English's. Now, I'll say that again, because when Helen Clark came in 2000, she was all against the Americanization of the health system. And at that stage, we'd actually had a whole bunch of things. We had corporatized hospitals. I mentioned that before.
We had a television soap that was based on that model.
We had basically what we did is we separated who ran the buildings and who bought the services. Now, the original thing, we had 4 of those, and they were called RHAs. And we only let them go for about 3 years, because what we found in only 3 years is we had 4 different health systems developing. So what became known as postcode health was actually happening then. What Labor then did was actually changed 4 into 23, and they were the DHBs. And Labor, that was a political compromise. I won't go into it then. But that even Labor admitted that was at least 13 too many, probably 14.
And that's the reason why Laura had to go to Palmerston Hospital instead of Masterton.
Yeah. So what Bill English did when he was minister in the late 90s was he basically wrapped all of the RHAs into a single purchasing authority called the Health Funding Authority, and that's effectively what Health New Zealand was. It was basically the purchaser, Now, the point is that if you want to have targets, if you want to have strategic control over the health system, the last thing you do is do what Helen Clark's government did, is basically give the hospitals the money. Because what they do is they spend it all themselves because it's an endless bottomless pit. And so this whole thing around, if you want to make strategic decisions around healthcare, if you want to reprioritise, if you want to do these things, this purchasing function becomes critically important. That is what the Ardern government saw. That is why they basically brought back national system, and they dumped their own predecessor system.
Yeah.
And so what is Simeon Brown doing? He's actually supporting Helen Clark's system.
Yeah.
How ironic is that?
I just want to show you something very funny. I don't know if I can share screen.
Go ahead.
Let's give it a crack. Come on. Let's have a look. Yep, this one here. Right. So have a look here. So these are the health targets of Q1. So this is the period between July and September. So here we've got where National has come into power. Okay, so overall, we're seeing a pretty consistent trend. People are being seen. Now, patients admitted, discharged, or transferred from ED within 6 hours. Where are we at, guys? 67.5%. So this is pretty consistent. Well, this is actually a drop-off from where Labour was at.
Yeah.
Patients waiting less than 4 months for first specialist assessment. Oh, shit. Look at that. That's under National. How about this one? Patients waiting less than 4 months for treatment. Flatlined.
Well, and the other thing is, can they even get onto the waiting list?
Yeah,
that was something that was often happening under National was, if you didn't get seen within the time frame, you got bumped off the waiting list and had to have your refuel redone.
And have a look at this too, immunisation rates. We had a bit of a dip off in 21. It went up, and now it's going back down again. What the fuck's happening here?
Yeah.
Shame on you, Simeon Brown.
Is it just me, or is every time Simeon makes a speech, does it look like he's on a stepping stool?
Oh,
yeah, so you want to talk about targets. There's your target. I just showed the targets. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly the same. Look, it's the same hypocrisy we talked about earlier in the podcast around worried about the safety of children in Maori families when 895 a year are getting injured in state care.
Yes.
And they completely ignore that because, so this is just, it's just more crap from this crap government.
Okay, let's get on to Huhana Linden, considering there's more than just National Labour in this parliament.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
I
stand here sad at the news that we have lost one of our best from the health system. Margiapa was the best of us. After 27 years of delivery of health services across the system, we lost a Pacific leader, we lost a wahine bus speaker, and we lost the CEO of Te Whatu Ora. And that's a shame on us in the way that we did not look after her. For she was a woman who maintained her composure, she came before select committee, she was under scrutiny, and the eyes of New Zealand were upon her, as she led a system that was to bring together a joined-up approach, an innovative way of delivering a new health system. And Margiapa said, this role has called on all of my 27 years of experience in health policy, planning and funding, operations and people leadership. It has also called upon all my experience, both in hospitals and as a funder of primary and community services. There is progress we have made together. We are delivering more care to more people, both in our hospitals and in our community and primary care sector. She was unifying the healthcare sector. 80,000 staff, multi-billion-dollar budget. Te Whatu Ora was bringing through reforms that would see efficiencies, that would see a way with which we could cut the bureaucracy. But Margiapa knew what was at the heart of our workforce, and that was quality delivery. Because we have a workforce that is stressed. We cannot turn our back on what our nurses and what our unions are telling us. They are telling us very clearly they need to be resourced better. We need $1 into the health system that genuinely funds a public health sector. Margiapa was the lady with the heart, and she worked alongside Rihanna Manuel
to establish that mahitahi that has been called co-governance. No, no, no. You cannot say that Te Aka Whaiora was all bureaucracy. Those kaimahi were based in Taitokerau. They were based in Tairāwhiti, in Taranaki. They were in the regions. There was only a tiny, tiny number of kaimahi in Wellington and Auckland. Te Aka Whaiora were connected, they were local, and they were listening and working alongside Te Whatuora. But no, it's for nothing. For nothing. You didn't even give them a chance. And that's the crying shame of where we're at in the health sector. So this year is about accountability. Absolutely. You can't keep blaming Labor. This year is about putting your neck on the line as the minister, somebody who's new to our sector, and to say, this is what I've done. Because as somebody from the health sector, I look forward to seeing what you can produce as the government. We have changes that have come wave after wave for our sector. We have seen the sacking of the Te Whatuora board, doing away with Te Aka Whaiora, bringing in a commissioner who said of his CEO just recently in the Post, the commissioner said, he was quoted saying that he wanted a chief executive who could build a team and lead a team that has got serious implementation capacity, that can, instead of writing about what they're going to do, can actually do it. Manga manga. Shame on the commissioner to dare undermine Mādiapa, that taonga that has delivered so much for her people, whether it's DHB, whether it's Ministry of Health, and then ka eke ia ki te taumata. She came forward, wahine Pasifika, to lead our waka hauora, and then we get a commissioner that undermines her publicly. Manga manga. Shame on that. Shame, because ultimately, if your chair, if your commissioner does not have your back, well then who does? We do. We back Mādiapa, we back all of the kaimahi on the workforce because they deserve better. We need to fuel our health sector properly. We need to acknowledge that public health services are a right for all New Zealanders, and we need to have an equity lens whereby all of us, no matter where we come from, if we're at the bottom of every socio-economic statistic, aka Māori and Pasifika, then we're going to get funded for it. Kia ora.
Todd Stevens.
Ooh, Hohana was on fire.
She's right.
She's
Yeah,
very
What else
good.
can I say?
She kind of nailed it. What does she need to know?
Yeah.
I mean, you notice that she really likes Lester Levy too.
But I mean, I can picture Lester Levy and Simeon Brown will be the two toxic managers that will basically bring down the health system.
Yeah, well, Lester Levy's got. Well, no, I won't do that because he'll probably come and sue me. So I'll change tack there. But I mean, this is, as I said, it's a hugely complex system. It doesn't react to a minister that can't think beyond sound bites and alliteration and repeating the same message again. It actually it's got, I mean, I remember Tony Ryle's maiden speech. And he was a national minister of health. And the point that he made is he said how he loved the passion of the people in the health sector throughout it. They were absolutely dedicated to what they did. And then he said, just imagine being the Minister of Education. You know, and so he was at least a minister that, to be fair, appreciated just how complex the system was and how it actually needed people to navigate that complexity. Now, we've got some really big time bomb issues here because Ian Rennie's recently given a speech as Secretary to the Treasury called, Twisting Two Curves, where he basically says New Zealand's on a track for bankruptcy. Now, a colleague of mine wrote pretty much the same report back in 2004. And it's basically the growth of health and it's not welfare expenditure, it's superannuation.
Yeah.
And you're actually looking at within the next 20 years, it's going to be more than the total tax take the government's got.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of thing that Simeon Brown should be actually looking at. We have got an aging population. It is a bulge aging population. Then we've got the problem we've got is we've got a demographic behind it that's much smaller. We're seeing that in terms of tax take. But for a period of time, we're going to have the boomers around for a long time, and they're going to be really expensive. They're going to be really expensive. And we have not thought about how we're doing that. And snipping bits and pieces here, and and what I'm really worried is that they'll just go down a route of simplistic privatisation, because that's exactly what we've seen what's happened in the UK. because it's pretty much the thing of you let it fall to pieces and then say it's hopeless because there's no managers left because you've gotten rid of them all. You say this is a leaderless thing which you've created, and you then basically go and hock it off to, well, here's the thing, go and do a Google search on the interest that Lester Levy's got in the private health sector.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what Todd Stevenson's got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I firstly want to pay tribute to Margie Upper, who resigned just 4 months ahead of the end of her contract. She took on what I would describe as probably one of the most challenging roles in the New Zealand health system, and I'll talk about that in a moment. I think it's also important to inject some facts into this debate. Dr. Nicholas Jones did not resign. His secondment actually ended, and he has returned to the Hawke's Bay. And again, I want to pay tribute to him for his leadership of the National Public Health System. They are both people that have contributed to our health system. I also want to acknowledge the new Minister of Health, Simeon Brown, who I think did an excellent job of talking about this government's health priorities. And I do have to agree with something that a member of the opposition said, that Margie Upper's leadership was undermined from the very start. Yes, it was. That's what you do when you put someone into the role of combining an organisation during a pandemic. She was given an impossible task, and she did it to the best of her abilities. But when you decide to make such radical changes in the middle of a pandemic that were not well thought through, you're actually setting someone up for a very, very difficult job. And she did her best under very, very difficult circumstances. The Minister also reflected on getting rid of health targets. Well, we have a saying in ACT, and in fact in many organisations, what gets measured gets done. And when you start to stop measuring the public health outcomes and services that Kiwis expect, things do slip away. And we heard from the Minister a number of very unfortunate statistics that went backwards around elective surgery, immunisations, etc. under the last government. This government is here and committed to cleaning up health. And that does mean bringing in some people into new leadership roles like Professor Lester Levy, who took over as the Commissioner. But it also means tidying up some of the other messes that were left in health. One obviously very dear to my heart is Pharmac, and the massive fiscal cliff that was left in Pharmac, which would have seen medicines, many of them cancer medicines, not continue to be funded. Again, this government had to come in, clean up that mess. The Minister also made an important announcement around Dunedin Hospital last week. Again, a project that had just been left to run off the rails. Well, again, this government has delivered some certainty to the people of Dunedin, and in fact the people of the south where I'm from, and that will actually go ahead and will actually be delivered in a responsible way, in a timely way. So, yes, health is very important to Kiwis, and they are not getting the health services that they expect, and that is a real shame. But we've got to completely be transparent that we've actually got to front up to these challenges, not bury them away, not try to just reorganise things, bring in more bureaucrats. We've actually got to say Kiwis deserve world-class health services supported by wonderful frontline healthcare professionals, and we have many of them, our doctors, our nurses and our other frontline staff, and that's who we're backing in to actually start to turn things around. And so it's very convenient for the opposition to just blank their minds of the mess they made in health over an extended period, but we're here to try and actually bring in some reality to that. And it was very good to see that the Minister will be continuing to focus on the 5 health areas that the government has put in place and actually measuring and making sure we're delivering against those. I do want to thank everyone in our public health system that's working very, very hard today, who worked very, very hard actually over the holiday period. We know it's tough out there, but we're here to make the tough decisions, the right decisions, and actually turn around this health system and actually have it deliver for Kiwis. Thank you.
Which is really interesting he says from South, because he's only been living in Queenstown since I think it was something like between 8 and 12 weeks before the last election, after David Seymour headhunted him to become a politician and placed him number 4 on the list.
Oh, God.
Does this guy Sue's Redmayne too?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of what he's like. He's just another glad hander. I mean, he's just a cheerleader.
I've dealt with him on fleet committees. He ain't this bad. I found him always quite pleasant to deal with because he's about fact-finding. He doesn't sit there and rabbit on about talking points, which is quite strange for an ACT person. But he does have a bit of experience that's a bit... He has a bit more of a social conscience than the average ACT person. But this speech should feel very ACT. And like the Dunedin Hospital was just basically an absolute debacle of, let's sit there and change this. We've realised that we got to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no shortage of people that want to train to be doctors and nurses here in New Zealand. When you've got like notices coming out of India saying, hey, nurses that want to move to New Zealand from India, don't move there unless you got a genuine job offer. You've got nurses that aren't getting jobs, that are getting qualified, and there's no job for them, even though there's a high demand for them. This again.
So much for the front line.
Exactly. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, like getting rid of the NCOs, it's like, next Simeon Brown will be Minister of Defence. For the NCOs, remove the rank from warrant officer right down to corporal. So basically, you go from private, and the next person up is warrant officer class 1. Or if it's the Army or if it's the Air Force, it's warrant officer. And I can't remember what the Navy equivalent is. But, is it going to do that? And say if it's on the officer side, are we suddenly going to have second lieutenants, and the next thing we have is, what do you call it? Was it captain, major? What's it called? Major? Brigadier?
Lieutenant colonel, brigadier.
Yeah. I know the Air Force one's better because I did ATC. So, are we just going to have a bunch of pilot officers, no flying officers, no flight lieutenants, no squadron leaders, and then we're just going to go to wing commanders?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, again, one of the things, I was reading through the reports, I was from the New Zealand Medical Journal, and one of the reasons why doctors are leaving is due to unpaid administration work. Where's the back office?
Yeah, this is the classic case. It's the same as research. You've got really highly trained scientists who are out washing cars because that's a really useful use of their time. And this is the thing here. You've got doctors, nurses, clinicians throughout the system having to do paperwork because they've taken away the back office because we support. It's just bullshit.
To the police.
And they're paid less than their Australian counterparts.
Yeah.
60%.
I mean, thank goodness we've got a health insurance system where we actually have to sit down there and ring and have some busybody who doesn't know what they're talking about sitting down there and doing it. Let's get for one more, Jenny Markov or Debbie Narua Packer.
Can we end on a good one?
Okay, I think I'm going to guess it's going to be Debbie.
Yeah, go for Debbie.
Because we know she always hits it on the mark. And for those who are wondering, Blake does have to go. That's the reason why his screen went blank. He did message, sorry, I've got to go. But then that still took 2 minutes before he left.
It's most important. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to finish my contribution now, as I've just noticed, as you have. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Debbie Narua Packer.
Tēnā koe te pika. First of all, I'd like to do a big mihi to Margie Upper for her commitment and contribution to our health, and also recognising how hard it has been not only with a task to transform health in such a short amount of time and then to come into another government that just wants to dismantle everything that had been created based from years and years of research and health academic experts' advice. Sadly, what we have here is an interesting quandary where we have a government previously that tried to fix things and a government previously that's trying to fix things, and in the meantime everyone else in Aotearoa is still being caught up in a backwash of poor health, poor backup, poor investment, and sadly seeing the absolute decline of anyone or anything here that represents a solution. And I guess the sad part about having this conversation is recently I was in the beside a parent in the health system, the public health system, and was really grateful for the expertise, the support, and those who really went up and beyond, given some of the facilities that they're working in. And the sad part about the debate that we're having at the moment is that everyone's pointing their finger at each other and no one has addressed the real big issue, is what the heck are we going to do to provide a solution? Is it really the debate here that it is the wrong guard, or are we going to have a deterioration where we see public health system is going to be replaced by privatisation? And it's a real concern. I mean, we have, for example, a minister that I've never known in the sector. And I've never, in all my years in iwi and all my years in working in health, I've never actually known. I have seen him in part of kaupapa that were anti-abortion, anti-trans, anti-takatapui, and that worries me, that we actually don't have the experience. And as fresh as the blood can be, if the blood is going to be pouring all over the public health sector, then I'm really concerned about what is that is going to be left. Where is the transformational change that our people are looking for? How are we going to make sure we keep the hospitals open? Because Dunedin sure as hell ain't happy with this government. How are we going to make sure that the A&E lines and the lists, the waiting lists are going to end? How are we going to make sure that our ageing people in Aotearoa can sit there and rely on a health system, not be unclear on if this government is indeed going down the track of privatisation? And I want to be really, really mindful of the debate and what we're deciding here, or discussing here, sorry. Shane Detty made it known that privatisation wasn't something on his agenda. And, you know, and I guess we talk along that road that saying, okay, well, we understand that, Shane, you're now gone. We We have leaders of coalition parties saying that privatisation should be the only way. And I'm really concerned for middle to lower income earners here in Aotearoa. What does that mean? We had David Seymour recently saying we need to get past the squirmishness. I mean, that's an interesting comment coming from him. But the reality is that we have, sadly, a government that is leaning and edging towards a whole lot of slashing and cutting for the purpose of moving Aotearoa New Zealanders into privatisation of healthcare. And that move will absolutely devastate the struggling families. It will devastate families who are already crushed by skyrocketing rents, who are already struggling to pay and afford groceries, the soaring power bills. Imagine those of our whānau Tamariki who are trying to get into doctors but they're unable to pay the fee. Privatisation has proven past time after time in other countries it does not work for those who have high needs, for those such as Māori who have high inequities, for those who live in low socioeconomic areas with complex social health issues. And it's really concerning for us that we are not hearing anything other than it is Labour's fault. There has been absolutely no plan. There is no assurance, there is no clarity for all of us here in Aotearoa, and those of us who just want to be able to live here with peace and dignity and to be able to make sure our elderly, our tamariki can get the care that they deserve, that our regions, our rural regions, get the hospitals that they deserve, that we're going to retain the nurses, that we're going to retain the doctors. So I do have a real sad concern that as we see the leadership and the management leave our system, we don't have anything from this government assuring that the economic growth agenda does not include the privatisation of our health sector. Kia ora.
Hit the nail right on the head. Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah. I can't think of anything better. But yeah, Simeon Brown's only experience of the health system is trying to stop other people from receiving healthcare.
She pretty much just summed up that entire report. I'm actually quite impressed she managed to do that in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah. A lot of Māori people live in rural areas. She's right. If you get doctors out into rural areas, you get locally trained doctors. You know, they're more likely to stick around. You got 60% of people who come over from other countries. 60% of them tend to leave, which puts quite an impact on.
My former GP at Newtown Medical Centre did a short stint in Hamilton, decided that wasn't the right place for him, and he moved to Wellington.
Yep.
Yeah, and he came all the way from Scotland. So. Yeah, what happens to someone like, they end up in a rural community and they go, yes, we finally got a doctor, and then suddenly, I heard that happen with Foxton. They had a planned successor for the doctor, and then the wife of the outgoing doctor screwed it all up. So the new doctor, the successor, ended up in a live-in practice, and there was a whole heap of Foxton people who shifted to her and live-in. But, they were the only ones who had cars. What about those who didn't?
Yeah. Yeah, it happens all the time where I live. Doctors going, doctors coming, notes getting mucked up. Happens all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say, Peter?
I mean, one thing I would say, which is really interesting, back in the 1990s, and this sounds like, the glory days of Bruce Springsteen tape coming out again. And the fact that I use tape sort of shows just how bloody ancient I am.
You still have a checkbook?
No, I don't, because the bank's closed it down. Although I did have a customer that used to give me checks, and he used to drive me mad because it would take the BNZ 5 days to clear a BNZ check to be able to pay a BNZ bill, but another BNZ. But we'll park that for a moment. One of the things that did happen under the purchase provider split that went through under National in the 1990s, it ended up with the Health Funding Authority, was once they got the money away from bricks and mortar, we had this proliferation of Māori health providers. And some of them range from basically a couple of midwives, a cell phone and a rental car, right the way through to quite sophisticated health clinics. And during the pandemic, and Debbie knows about this, this is where they got the camper vans, and they actually went around people's driveways individually because they knew who were the anti-vaxxers, they knew the problems that they faced, and they quietly talked people around. This is the sort of stuff which happens. And I ended up giving a speech to a Māori Council health group, be about 6 months before the last election. And 3 things I said is, firstly, I warned them of a racist national government. That was pretty much on the money. I said, where we need to go to is, back in the day, my namesake had a choice between, because Peter Fraser effectively set up the New Zealand health system in 1938 under the Social Development Act.
And you like it how in Johnsonville there was a street named after him?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the key thing which he had a choice. He could either, and I mean, they're talking about they set something up during a pandemic. The New Zealand health system was set up during World War Bloody II.
True.
Yeah, and then oversaw.
And that's kind of a big deal. Now, what my namesake had the choice of was basically, do I fight the British Medical Association and therefore integrate primary and secondary care, or do I fight Hitler? And he decided Hitler was easier, and he was right, and he won. So one of the things that we've had is a gaping hole in the New Zealand health system has been the integration of primary and secondary care. That's point number one. Point number two, I told the group, is that from a Māori perspective, primary and secondary is really important. But I said, here's the other thing. It's the integration of all the services that happen under the rubric of whānau ora with primary health care. And then how that links into DSS, mental health, all those other services, how those are stitched together. So I said there's actually a number of integrations that needed to be done. And to be fair, Health New Zealand was actually trying to do that.
Yeah, just hadn't quite got a chance to get there.
But just cut out underneath them. Yeah.
Okay, so for coming up in the submissions that are due soon, we've got the Paora Healthy Futures 3-day postnatal stay amendment bill closes tomorrow, the 17th. We have the gene technology bill that also closes tomorrow on the 17th. And the local water services bill that closes next Sunday, the 23rd, which is basically sorting out being the successor for Free Waters. So that's coming up for submissions. Thank you for joining us tonight, and good luck with the runway lights.
Yeah.
So what are we prepared for? Is there new lights? Are we having LED bulbs, or are we going back to fluorescence? Or
no. Well, basically, what's happening? This is actually well done, Wellington Airport. Effectively, what they're doing is they're putting in safety measures, which gives them, in effect, a longer airfield out of the existing airfield, because it allows planes to safely land earlier and take off later. So it's an effective extension of the runway. Now, to be fair to the people at Wellington Airport, it's a bit more complex than that, but they get really excited about it, so I've sort of punched it down. So what my job in that is, there's all the existing safety lines on the runway that have to come off. And the critical thing is they have to come off in a way where you can't see them. Because if you're an airplane coming in and you're confused between the new lines and the old lines, and you don't know where to land, and you've got 700 or 600 people on board, or 300 people on board, or 200 people on board, that's not a good thing, because Wellington Airport, even on a good day, ain't that long. So this is why we're doing quite a lot of testing there to make sure that when we do this, we actually are doing a really good job.
Yeah, and yes, you've got to do it during those curfew hours when you do the work, because
we've got the mad thing between that last plane coming in from Sydney and then the first plane going out in the morning. So we've got about 4 hours.
Yeah, I know it's a very tight turnaround period on it. And I know that all sorts of funds of that airport curfew causes all sorts of issues. Yeah.
But I better go off and do some airport stuff.
Yep. Okay, we'll be back next week for the Order Paper Podcast. See you then. Have a good evening.
Have a good day.
Thank you for watching the Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened, so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/itsinthaballot. The Order Paper Podcast is brought to you by It's